Back to the big developing news of this morning here in Washington on immigration, that Senate leaders have found a way forward to agree, it appears, on border security. That news comes on the heels of the Congressional Budget Office and the Joint Committee on Taxation issuing those reports saying that the plan will improve the economy by close to $1 trillion over the next 2 decades. So a good question this morning is what's stopping lawmakers in the House from passing bipartisan reform? We want to bring in our gaggle right now, Liz Sidoti from the Associated Press, AEI visiting fellow Ramesh Ponnuru he writes for the National Review and Bloomberg View. It's nice to see you finally in person as opposed to watching you on the tube. And Democratic strategist Chris Kofinas is here as well. So let's start with immigration, if we can, very quickly as we go around the horn right now. I want to get a sense from you, Ramesh, right off the bat. Was it the CBO that put the fire under the Republicans to finally get this thing going at this point?
Well, I think there's no question that supporters of this legislation are using the CBO score to say, look, this is a fiscally responsible, pro-growth piece of legislation. But the opponents are using it to say, CBO says this is only a 25% reduction in illegal immigration and wasn't getting control of the borders the whole point of this exercise.
So the question, Chris, I guess, is what happens on the House side? Is this get enough votes and then put enough pressure on John Boehner, and ultimately what decision does he make?
I'm not sure anyone has an answer for that, including John Boehner. I mean, he's got a major problem in his caucus. This is nothing new. This has been the narrative now, been going on for years. And this division between, I think, those who realize that both politically and policy-wise it makes sense to do immigration reform, and those who just don't. Who don't believe it's the right thing to do. And you can't convince them. I don't know how he balances that. And if he subscribes to the Hastert rule, the majority of the majority, he's going to have problems. And if it fails in the House, Republicans will have nowhere to hide come midterm elections, in particular the next presidential.
Liz, first of all, how many votes does this get the 70 votes that they need in the Senate side to sweep through the House? And where do you think this does go in the next several days?
Yeah, it might. I mean, I think there are enough folks in the Senate, on the Senate side, that are pragmatic and that look at this and say, this is something that we need to do for the country, for the long-term viability of the country, economically, culturally, politically. If the Senate does pass it, the pressure on Boehner is going to be so significant. But, I always look at John Boehner. I'm from Ohio, and I remember him back in the day. This is a guy who wants to do big things. And so I can see a scenario in which he says, I'm going to go big and, risk my leadership position by angering the right.
Ramesh, how much pressure is on John Boehner right now as he tries to make these decisions?
I think it's pretty significant. He himself has speculated that he could lose his speakership over this issue.
He was asked that very question yesterday.
That's
going to cost you your job.
But, look, if there are 70 votes in the Senate, assuming the Democrats almost all vote for this legislation, that means only a minority of Senate Republicans are voting for this bill. I'm not sure how much pressure that puts on Boehner's House Republican colleagues to support it.
Chris, give us a sense, though, as we look at this right now. You got your Corker on board, you got your Hoven on board, who are bringing this thing to the Senate. We should hear about it at some point later today. So what other sticking points then do exist going forward? What's left?
In the Senate?
Yeah.
Not many.
I mean, excuse me, on the House side, is the Border Patrol the last thing?
This has nothing to do with the policy. This has everything to do with politics. This is not about the policy. The policy is going to be settled in the Senate. If you sit down and actually have a rational, reasonable discussion, after the CBO report came out and had, very clear in terms of the impact on the deficit, now you have this question about border security being addressed. What else is there left? This has to do with an ideological agenda that a significant majority of Republicans in the House are unwilling to change. And if they don't, that's fine. They are going to suffer the political consequences. It's that simple.
Boehner already reaching out to the Democrats, meeting with the House Democratic Caucus, I think, some members just yesterday.
Yeah, and
Hispanic Caucus, excuse me.
And that kind of action that he's taking is really significant. I think what it shows is, again, he's a guy who understands history, he takes a long view, and these individual House members, the conservatives, they really are just looking out for, their reelection prospects, and they're very conservative.
They're calling this new proposal the border surge, if you don't think it has McCain and Graham fingerprints on it as well. Trivia time, we asked how many